Welcome back to the Cineposium podcast. I'm Martin Ibarra Ramos, and I'll be hosting on my own today. Thank you all for joining us again for this week's episode. In case you missed our episode last week, curated by myself actually, we discussed Jairo Bustamante's film La Llorona, which is available to stream on Shudder. And I thoroughly enjoyed breaking down that very, very complex film, and hope you all get a chance to watch the film and that you enjoy our conversation and find it insightful. And now to shift gears to this week, I'll first let you guys know how the show works. So every week we invite members or collaborators of Cineposium to curate a film for remote viewing and have a conversation about the film. New episodes will be published every Thursday with various members from Cineposium and guests to discuss the films with our weekly curators. This week's curator is Shuwen Yang, and we also have a guest appearing on the show, Dawei, to join in on the conversation. So, Shuwen, with that, I'd like to invite you to share your presentation for this week's film.
Oh, thank you, Martin, and also Dawei. I'm really excited to be here this week to discuss Taiwanese filmmaker Edward Yang and his work with you guys. Just some background information, Yang is one of the leading figures of the Taiwan New Cinema movement, during which time the movies produced not only serve as a reflection on Taiwan's history, but also record society's transformation from an agrarian society to modern urban society. Yang devoted his career to portraying the impact of neoliberal capitalism on the lives of the citizens of Taipei. Some of his famous works include Yi and a Brighter Summer Day. The film we choose to present this week is Terrorizers, which is Yang's third feature film. It was released in December 1986. Setting in 1980s Taipei, the film starts with portraying a series of seemingly scattered events happen on the same morning. A crime scene, a hospital professional talking to his wife, a struggling writer about her novel, a photographer taking photos of the crime scene, pointing his lens towards a young woman, the white chick who is escaping away. To briefly summarize, this film intertwines four main plot strands containing around 10 characters, and is structured in a way that relation between characters unfolds pretty slowly. It is until the middle of the film that these characters coincidentally encounter or are connected to each other. The white chick makes a prank call to the depressed writer, which fuels her suspicion of her husband's non-existent promiscuity, all the more ammunition to leave him. These encounters lead to the final part, a climax, a tragedy, with this authenticity still kind of blurred as the final 10 minutes shift between reality and fictionality and leave us with an open ending. The film won several awards both in Taiwan and international festival, and also drew attention in the academia. For example, in Frederick Jameson's piece, Remapping Taipei, he has commented it as the postmodern film. I personally find it a rich text to explore. It emphasizes simultaneity, as well as shows the scattered urban space, while individuals are boxed, confined, and isolated. It also shows how citizens are connected or not connected to the material world as well as the sonic environment. Sometimes it is the space that dominates the frame, waiting for people to enter, which I think is a form of decentralization of human beings. It also applies this montage collage aesthetics, so we have to see clues throughout the whole story and keep asking, who are these people? Who are the terrorizers? And what's more, the story is told in a cold tongue, which is partly why people call Edward Yang a surgeon with a knife who cuts sharply into the Taiwan society and reveals the reality. But apart from telling a story, this film also challenges narrative. How do we consider its metafiction or self-reflexivity part? Is the whole film just a story written by Yu Fen, the female writer? Or is it true? Is it reality? Indeed, I think until today the film is still like a puzzle waiting for us spectators to solve. Some people might say that Yang's film is at a pretty slow pace and a little bit hard to follow, but if you keep watching, I guess it won't let you down. And this is it, and I hope you all enjoyed watching this film.
Thank you so much, Shu, and honestly, that feels perfect to, sort of jump into this film. It really summed up a lot of the ideas and questions that I had for myself throughout and immediately following the film. So, usually we sort of begin our conversations on the film here with first just reactions on our sort of, casual reactions in watching the film. and then we'll jump into the conversation from there. So, if I go first, I'll say so. I watched the film this morning before recording, and I think the word that you used, puzzle, is exactly what came to mind for myself, and in that it didn't necessarily feel like something that at the same time that felt essential to put together and see the full piece necessarily. Instead, for me, it felt like it just felt important to, I guess, pay attention to the different tensions that are explored between characters and seemingly between location and characters, because something that I noticed immediately and couldn't let go of was what felt like a very intentional focus on Taipei, on the sort of urban quality to it, and this kind of modern life. It felt pretty important to these characters who are living in these kind of private moments of what I consider despair. Just really fascinating to kind of consider that kind of reflective, transformative experience that seems to be going on across the film. Dawei, what did you think of this film?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you just described, we can tell from the very opening of the movie. We open with the shot of Taipei, the city at night, and we see the street light and the car light, and we have a lot of wide shots on the neighborhood. And for sure, like the environment are just full of details and full of life, and it's that kind of feeling we're talking about. This is not really a thriller or a type of crime drama. I get it when I see the police car shot from very far away. It's a very wide shot. I know, okay, this is not going to be thrilling or something. This is just going to present something that kind of just happens. It's not supposed to make me feel like the narcos chasing each other down, the excitement, but just kind of be objective and okay, see the city, see the setting, and just see quite objectively what's happening there.
Yeah, I have to agree, and that also gave me a sense of like there's this notion of this kind of ordinary, almost everyday feeling to it, in opening that way, and in the consistent visual display of Taipei. We often get those extreme wide establishing shots of various cities and or various locations and buildings and alleys, and even within certain interiors there are wider shots just to we almost feel like a sort of bystander to a lot of what's going on here, and I found that quite fascinating to consider in terms of what's going on between these characters. Do you have any thoughts on this element of the film, Shuwen?
Well, I think regarding the space, I mean, in this film, it's pretty interesting that like these characters seldom walk through the city, but you just see scattered images, scattered shots of the city space, and I think which emphasizes this isolation of people. And I think it is very important that these people are confined, because then we could see like how they gets connected coincidentally, or I mean through the telephone, through the material. So I'm pretty interested in your opinions about, I mean, how material world connects each other, and how this coincidental encounters. I mean, how do you feel about these coincidental encounters? Yeah.
I'm not sure because this is not really a hyper dramatized film. It really allows me to sit back and just feel the flow, if you know what I mean. It's like it's not about okay, what's the purpose or what's the intention, what's this philosophy the author is trying to teach me. It's more just like a feeling as it is. It's just like these people's lives they're just running through, and these coincidences, I they're not like a shock or surprise or a twist. They're things that just kind of happens. Actually, when I first watched it, I didn't really connect how the prank call is related to the divorce. It only came around when I think the wife mentioned it in the end. Like, okay, oh shit, it's like wow, that's a factor in that. I didn't really uh, uh, clock it, because this is it. It's very subdued, very subtle. It doesn't really like use a monologue to describe every emotional beat to me. So it just takes some time to figure out, and but you let me figure it out. So I think it's a fun ride. So
I have to agree. There was something that felt like this sort of invisible connection between these characters, or you can't tell if it was intentional or not, or if it's if it's real or not. And I mean, this is my first experience with Yang's work, and I I wonder if this is something consistent with his films, but there seems to be some sort of like I don't know if haunted or haunting element is kind of the right way to put it, but it just seems to kind of tap into the internal emotions that are going on within these characters, and during those how we see those connections play out. There seems to be something that's present but not quite obvious or not quite in your face, if that makes sense.
yeah, even when sometimes it's really like obvious and in your face, it's just revealed in such a shocking and visually striking manner. Like do you remember the wall with the big pictures, a lot of pictures of her face? So I didn't know that the guy was obsessed with this girl until that moment, and that moment came as such a genuine surprise. But it's also like it's not creepy, right? It's like you can if a guy has a wall full of this strange woman's face, it's got to be creepy, but it doesn't feel creepy. It felt intimate in that scene, and they're in that dark room talking to each other, and that was a great scene. And when the girl left, the wind will blow through the pictures. It flip flops, and you hear the sound effect. It's gone. It's very poetic. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Well, since you're talking about this collage of this photo on the wall, I mean, I was thinking that the whole film, I mean, collage is a word that recurrently appear in my head. I mean, I felt like the story is a collage. I mean, that visual is full of this collage, and we piece things together, but we don't know if it's true or not. So, um, I, I mean, this collage. I mean, it's a whole picture, but there is this scattered elements. I mean, scattered parts of it. I mean, it's just like how everyone is this isolated individual in the city, and you have to make a collage of the city so that you can have an impression about it. And
I
I
agree.
was yeah, and I was also thinking about this photographer, since we're talking about his works. I mean, he's pointing his lens and at like random people in the city, um and I think some people say that this part is in I mean, is connected to Antonioni's blow up, and I was wondering if you have watched that. And I was thinking if we could talk about like the subjectivity of like the photographer, and like how we see the world, how we perceive the world, and how we like understand it. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I do think that I absolutely found the element of the photographer so thought provoking. Obviously, there's this attention to fact versus fiction in this film, and for at least in how I interpret things and how I experienced it, it certainly felt important to, as you kind of expressed, establishing a sort of authenticity to Taipei, to modern Taipei, and painting these fictional stories or character designs over it. And I mean, I'm not sure if I've quite hashed out what that all means to me yet, but it's certainly something I'm continuing to think about. It I guess right now, as I continue to talk about it, there's, I would say, something that I've thought quite a lot about is the element of the photographer's sort of home, dark room, and life that he captures being sort of developed there. And you know there's this idea that we see ourselves as we as people see ourselves one way, but life sees us another way, and perhaps I guess I'm considering how the life developed in those photos is perhaps the more holistic or complete sort of representation of what that life actually looks like. But this is very mixed, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. So that way, what do you think about all this?
I do see a point here. I think the photographer's journey, like his obsession with the photos, and which actually led him to this girl. They, I don't know, they fell in love for 5 minutes, and the girl left. It just sort of happened. It's like life, and it's like life sometimes. And then this woman, this author, she thought that, okay, my novel was just trash. It's not going to win anything. And it turns out that this novel was great because it reflects, somehow it's inspired by and reflects her own marital life. So I think there's this running theme of how these representations and, media kind of affect their life, and they come, the fake things kind of become real to them, and or they become the bridge to real changes in their life. And I think that's part of what Edward Young was exploring in the urban life of Taipei. It's this fiction versus reality, representation versus the real. So I think you're getting to something there, Martin.
She went. I'm still thinking quite a lot about that attention to Taipei and to authenticity, and I'm wondering if you have any further thoughts on that in particular, and in what it might have, why it was important to, I guess, expose this time of Taipei, this sort of.
I think this kind of, like, do you guys feel this kind of underlying anxiety
Absolutely.
beneath all this peaceful, slow, slow moving narrative? There's this anxiety, and it's
this almost in like disintegration of life.
The murder, and the wife is unhappy. Like everybody's sort of facing a challenge here, and
Yeah.
I'm not very familiar with Taiwan history, especially modern
Well,
history. But I bet, like in the 80s, that's when the Taiwan became an economic powerhouse, right? That's when their lifestyle really started to change. Is it?
yeah, well, I guess it's time for me to jump in because
Please do. Please do.
Taiwan New Cinema movement kind of starts after this rigid dictatorship ends in Taiwan. So
When did
before
it,
it was,
when did
yeah,
it,
before, uh, you mean the Taiwan New Cinema movement?
yeah, the rigid dictatorship, like
Indeed, the martial law ended in 1987, but before the atmosphere starts to get like relaxing and there's this industrial development, and that's when these directors begin to explore. I mean, like reconfigure this Taiwan image, and they're thinking about what is the reality in Taiwan, what is our own Taiwan culture, and I mean, so this is something like a rebellion, like against those dictatorship, against even before the Japanese colonial period, and so that's the time when they want to reclaim their own culture, and they're exploring like what is the truth of this city, what is the reality like here. So I guess this puzzle is also like the real urban experience that Taiwan people will experience, because they don't know how, I mean, what life should be like, or what the authenticity is, what is our authentic culture. So this is a product of that history, I think.
I mean, this makes so much sense now, because these are
Yeah.
mundane people living their mundane lives, fighting through their mundane struggles, right? It's not, big robots conspiracy anime. It's just ordinary people with their fears and their flaws, and their divorce, that kind of stuff,
Absolutely.
and it's all weaved together, like anti Hollywood, anti dramatic aesthetic. I would say even it reminds me a lot of Ozu and Italian neorealism for sure, because there was this similar movement post Mussolini Italy, right? They
Yeah.
started to liberate, and we see all these amazing realistic movies on the Italian lives, like German Year Zero, etc., etc. And Taiwan, this is it's a very similar thing. So
Yeah, this is a fascinating thing because there are at the time as well. I mean, even beyond Italy, there's various numerous movements of realism that come about and all try to find what that true, to use the word you used, Shuwen, that element of true and what true means to that particular country and to those filmmakers. Um, I think that this certainly feels akin to those movements as well. Some of the other sort of modern anxieties that I jotted down are like being unable to pay the rent, or you know past romance sort of coming up again. The competitive nature between friends at work. All these things feel very ordinary and familiar, and yet to these characters, a source of serious anxiety, and perhaps leading to an element of growing hostility, which I also found interesting, in that we get various scenarios of a kind of hostility throughout the film.
sorry, what kind of hostility? I kind of didn't follow there.
Obviously, there are these setups with forgive me, I can't remember each of the characters' names, but
No, it's fine. Me neither.
um, obviously those setups in which the young woman meets these men, takes them into the room, and then these setups occur in order to rob them. I guess the robbing in general that she performs throughout, and obviously the finale, the sort of coda dream murder. I'm not sure quite what to call that whole coda of the film, but
Taxi driver,
yeah, absolutely. That's a great comparison there. Yeah.
But in the end, it's a taxi driver dream. In the end, he just murders himself because he cannot do those things himself. I mean, it would be interesting to know what the director thinks, but I think it's really like maybe a really nice point about Taiwanese culture and American culture, maybe. In
Mm.
the end, taxi driver, the guy will get his revenge with violence or something. I mean, it's still tragic. Like both choices are tragic, but
Yes.
why did Scorsese, Paul Schrader let De Niro make that choice, and why did Edward Young, make the opposite choice?
Yeah, perhaps if we can find something in which he talks about this, and that's maybe something we can offer our listeners something to read on later on. We'll have to search for that.
Well, I'm actually pretty curious about like how do you think about the film language? Because I mean, maybe from today's perspective, it's kind of cliche because it's montage and there's there's this sound editing. I mean, the police sirens and I mean, that's pretty interesting. And I
Yes,
don't know. It feels
yes,
like the
yes. In
sonic
opening,
environment is,
yes,
yeah.
you're right. In the opening, they use sound to tell a lot of stories, like the gunshot and the running away. I'm trying to that. Yeah, there are a few points that really left an impression. But to be honest, when I was watching the film, my first impression was just how bad the sound effects were, because it's an old movie.
I had the same feeling. The gunshots felt
Yeah.
so outdated because
So,
it's so old.
I'm like, what? I just can't get into this. But I'm like, okay, I gotta do this podcast, and I have to watch this and take this seriously. But yeah, it's like he used sound to not show you stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but like in the beginning, like to just kind of hide the violence and to not directly show you. And
Or perhaps to
later
give you a
on,
sense of perspective, right? I mean, it feels
yes,
like where the camera is situated in the scene a lot of the times is is precise and intentional, and I think I found that kind of interesting, that there's this authentic use of sound perspective that I think, even though, as you say, some of the sounds do kind of take you out of it, watching it today, it did feel important to you as a viewer, and perhaps becoming involved with the film in that way, and sort of, feeling a bit closer, pulled in.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
felt
The
that felt
intention,
important.
yeah, the intention does matter here because it's an old film. We have to watch it in context.
Yeah.
Another thing I've been thinking about is what instances of violence is hidden and what instances of violence is presented straight on. Like, violence is not this samey thing, right? You just shoot somebody. Like, everyone you shoot, every fire you, every shot you fire, it's presented differently. Like, what the most the one that left the most impression is when the girl kills the guy who finds out that she's stealing her money, and the guy is like lighting the cigarette, and suddenly the girl just charges into the shot. I think that's a great way of handling it because you just did not expect it. Like, a conventional way of covering this is to show you that the girl have this knife under her pants, and then to show you the close up, have a moment of them just staring at each other, and then the girl goes for it, right? But this is the complete opposite of that. It just takes you by surprise, and I think it's this kind of to handle the sequence this way is completely within the film language of this movie. It's not a Hollywood movie. It's not conventional coverage. It's hang you in the wide, in the medium for 20 seconds, and you just gotta observe and watch what happens. And that's a great shot. And another shot that left a great impression for me is when the husband he goes to kill the guy who cheated with his wife, and we see the husband climb on the close-up, climb on the carpet, and that's another significant death. And I think that signifies, okay, this guy really hates him. You know what I mean? I think one of the few extreme close-ups in the movie, and it just shows you like the intensity of the hate. But his own death in the end, his suicide, is hidden from us. We don't see it. We only hear it. So what does that tell me? It tells me that, okay, this is just very tragic. His life, he feels that his life is not that significant, and I think the significance of his own life is kind of drawn his own hatred for the other, and that's what the movie is telling me. And we're gonna, if you really want to know what the director tries to say, maybe we just gotta find some interviews and stuff. But that's my interpretation of the different kinds of violence and how it's presented in a movie. I'm just scrolling down the timeline. What do you guys think? Like, what about the mental violence? What's the other kind of violence like in the movie? I think it's very interesting.
Well, I mean, the mental ones, there's one I noticed, like, in that marriage, like, because when the female writer's novel got published, I mean, the husband just says, well, who reads her novel? It's like he doesn't really pay attention, and I felt like there's something cold, this if we call it violence, I mean, it happens a lot in the family. I mean, another one is I felt like the director's playing with this violence because there is a sequence where the photographer's girlfriend is trying to commit suicide, and there is this the line says that, oh, I can't suffer anymore, I wanna die, but then the camera just shifts to the white girl who is making a prank call. I mean, we don't know if those lines are the girl who are trying to commit suicide.
Oh, I remember it. So yeah, I was confused like who's speaking, but like the two characters have the same emotional journey there, and they weave them together. I think that's great. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, well, I thought that's like a prank call. I mean, that's white girl. She was just joking, and I felt like this is a play. I mean, this is not only a play between like reality and fictionality. I mean, what is the truth? I mean, who is saying that? But also like, I mean, that girl who the photographer's girlfriend, she is also experiencing this maybe violence, mental violence from his boyfriend, I guess. But then the director just omits this part and shifts it to something like funny, something like a joke. And so I mean that's also a way to portray this violence, I guess.
Yeah, and
Um,
just to piggyback of what Shuwen just said, I think the relationship between the husband and wife is actually quite hollow, isn't it? Because I remember the husband's superior asked him, "Okay, your wife is writing novel, and you know what is it about?" And the husband is just like, "I don't read them. I don't even know what's going on." It's like they live in the same house, and the wife sits in there writing all day, and they don't even know what she's writing. And later on, he goes back to King, go back to live with me. I'm like, no, the woman is not going to go back with you. You don't give a shit. You don't care about her well-being and what she's doing.
Yeah, it doesn't even have that line in which he says, "I didn't know writing could be so deadly," something along those lines.
yeah,
That
at the
that
very beginning, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, really? I don't remember that line. Like in the beginning.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I jotted it down just because it seemed interesting, and lo and behold, it carried a little more weight toward the end of the film.
And I think
Yeah.
just to go back to Shuwen's point, I think their lives can be so easily invaded by these fake representations and signs because it is so hollow. Their relationship, the connection is none. It's void and hollow, and that's why these hollow signs can make such an impact, like a prank call. I think that's what maybe we're just thinking too much.
No, I
but,
think
but I
that's
think that's very interesting.
mm,
All these clues.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I felt like this violence is like being ignored. I mean, it feels like this mundane life is also a kind of violence on everyone, I guess. So, I mean, yeah, this hollow.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of related to what we talked about earlier, right? This is about life in Taipei, and it's
Yeah.
different,
Mm.
but different characters' daily lives, but they're sort of connected by their setting and their emotional journey. Like they're all struggling to be happy in different sorts of ways, and they all face their kind of challenges. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's quite thought provoking, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking about like for I mean film language, like the frame, like different angles of shots, like wide shots, or I mean how the doors or the windows inside this film, like how they confine people in different part at different part of the frame. And well, I was thinking like, David, you study editing. Do you have like comments on this frames, like
Uh, no, it's obviously a lot of wide shots, a lot of deep focus. So the characters are situated within the environment, and the setting is as much of a character as every other character. And so, what left some impression on me in terms of editing is the smash cut at places. Like, do you remember a saying where the wife goes to talk to her former lover in the park,
mhm.
green, like in the woods, and they were having this nice moment. The guy's like, "Oh my god, I always thought of you as talented, blah blah blah," and this the sort of connection that she never had with her husband, and we just cut in bed. They just slept together, and that's a
Mhm.
very like I'd
Yeah.
say, fast and just quick way of just telling us what's happening, and it doesn't really give you the whole, okay, the woman is struggling to make the decision whether to commit adultery, and we don't have any of that. Like, the decision just happens in the cut, and things just happened. I think it's part of the aesthetic of the film.
It also felt like there was this kind of element of like distance between people that within compositions felt like Yang was exploring that within his compositions. There's this kind of juxtaposition between scenes like that in which there's these close, intimate moments between people and perhaps with their possessions as well. But then there's those are kind of juxtaposed with these wider shots of people and within these kinds of spaces in their homes and whatnot that actually show the physical distance between them, perhaps even in certain linear forms as well. But yeah, it felt like he was using the frame to kind of tap into this idea of distance between people, and I guess what moments of intimacy and moments of distance. And I thought that was really exquisitely treated.
Yeah, an example that came to mind while you were saying those things was when the white girl finds out about the photographer, like in their old base, right? There's this wide shot. It's all dark, and we see this orange light on the two of them, but they're so far away. They're on opposite side of the room, but from there, let me just find that shot real quick on my timeline. But from there, they start to form this connection, which later fall apart very quickly. And I think it's just very well handled. I'm just gonna they're on complete opposite side and of the room, but okay, let me see what happens next. Then we go to singles. Then we go to like them talking together. They didn't physically get closer, but the shots and the images telling us, okay, the relationship is progressing. And then we go to the next shot after establishing shot is in the day, right? The guy says on the bed it's morning and day, and then it's still day. And then the next shot, they are very close together in this medium, and they kiss. And it's just, I think the sequence is just very well handled. It's very subtle, right? It's a very basic visual language that everybody knows about, but it's just deliberate and convincing.
Yeah. Well, I think frame like works to tell you how people are connected or not connected. I mean, it's also like the frame tells you how people is connected or not connected to the world. I mean, I remember like, because what impresses me is like the camera is sometimes it's at the static position, it doesn't move, and it's just people enter the frame. It's not camera tracking the people. So it feels like it emphasizes their how helpless they are. I mean, how challenging their life is. They don't own the world around them. They're dominated by the material world. So I feel like it also tells this relationship between people and that urban city.
Yeah, for sure. And there are moments, just to piggyback off what you just said. Do you remember the fight scene between the husband and the wife? The husband goes to find the wife at her company with the cheater. Yeah, and we're on this wide, and the husband, the wife, and the wife and her lover was on the other side of the glass door, and the shot just feels very voyeuristic. It's not in his perspective or anybody's perspective. We're just watching this unfold like a bad bystander. We're just like a stranger that just sits on the company sofa and just watch this unfold, even though it's a critically emotional scene. And
yeah, and almost fly on the wall perspective. And
yeah,
and to continue piggybacking off of Shuan's point here, I think that these urban spaces, these homes, apartments, businesses, are all kind of portrayed as sites that house, tensions and secrets and betrayal and hostilities and all these things. It kind of comments on them as spaces in which these things happen in a sort of ordinary life, but within these specific lives. So
yeah, another example of the frame telling us the relationship is the wife in the kitchen when the husband, they were talking about, okay, why did you leave? You didn't even tell me that. And the wife tells him, okay, you never understood me. You remember that scene, right? We have a very long scene go on the wife's face. Okay, you never tell me, like, no, you never really understood me. That's what she meant. And before that shot, we see this wide of the wife in the kitchen, and the husband is in the living room, and the light in the husband's side is very warm, and the light in the kitchen is very cold, and they're separated by this door frame. And this visual metaphor is already telling us where the relationship is heading, and where this each of these characters are at emotionally. Like the husband loves the wife, right? The husband still loves her, even though his love is quite, I would say, hollow, and it doesn't give. It's a kind of love that doesn't give substance to the relationship, doesn't give happiness to the wife, but it's still warm. There's still like passion burning, but the wife is like, man, it's all cold in here. It's the light is telling us these stories, and I think it's very subtle. But upon second watching, I think that's why I really got into the film. At first, I was just really bored. I think I got into it about halfway through for some reason, and I think these like very subtle but carefully articulated visual language does work on our mind and give us this very cohesive and impactful experience.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys answer a lot of my questions. I mean, I was, cause I mean, I have watched it for twice or three times. I mean, but I don't really have the answer about like what does the photographer, why do we have a photographer here, and I mean, how does the frame works, like, and also the sound and also relationships between people. I mean, it's really interesting to talk to you about this, and I felt like I have more deep understanding of this film, I guess. Yeah, and it's certainly worth rewatching. And yeah.
No, I can't. It's so slow, man. I
Okay.
barely survived the first watch through. I'm very impatient nowadays.
Well, thank you, Shuwen, for presenting this film this week. I have to. I mean, I'll agree. I personally think if I come back to watching this film, I think I will come experience it with at least with a better prepared mind and a sort of watchful eye for things and for this sort of language. I mean, I think this episode could have been an episode on craft analysis entirely and gotten into things like the play between light and shadow and these framings and the parallels between these characters and the urban spaces. I think there's just so much to talk about. We could do an entire podcast series on these things in this film, but I think this was a wonderful selection for the podcast this week. And so, yeah, thank you again. And thank you, Dawei, for joining us this week.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. So with that'll about do it for this week's episode. We hope you all enjoy the conversation, whether you're a returning listener or if this is your first time with us. We appreciate you tuning into the show. Please subscribe on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please do spread the word. You can follow us on Instagram at Cineposium and on Twitter at Cposium to keep up with updates and to keep in communication with us. Also, if you're interested in subscribing to our weekly e-newsletter, email us at cineposium.ucla@gmail.com. Thank you all again for listening. Until next week, take care, everyone.